Welcome everybody to the Right Conversation, the virtual edition. We really appreciate all you panelists and everybody who's tuned in via Zoom. Um, this is Mental Health Awareness Month, and we're just trying our best to bring different people together to try to normalize this conversation around mental wellness. I'm JD Dubois, the founder of Everyone Has a Story. We're excited to have everybody here and excited for this conversation. One of the reasons why we decided to bring it virtually is obviously with the COVID-19 pandemic, we had plans of taking this conversation once our Pistons season was over around the country to different universities, but due to circumstances, just trying to still have that community as best as we can. And this platform has allowed us to really continue to share this safe space and continue to normalize the conversation with different individuals, bringing their stories to life. So without further ado, we'll go about 45, 50 minutes of conversation. And then along the way, in the question and answer box, just send in any questions that you may have along the way, or once we get towards the end, if there's any thoughts that any attendees have, just send in your questions and we'll get to as many as we can.
So I'll get started. I am Dr. Corey Yeager. By craft, by trade, I'm a licensed psychotherapist working with families and specifically adolescents. My day job is that I am the life coach for the Detroit Pistons. And one of the reasons that I'm always excited about doing this is the opportunity, as JD said, to come together in community. That anytime we can be in conversation, it is part of building and bonding community, and now more than ever, we need that. So it's one of the reasons that I'm excited to do that. On top of that, tomorrow being Memorial Day, I think it's something that's in my mind in terms of thinking about those people that are no longer here in my life that impacted who I am today. My grandparents, Granny and Papa, and my father. I think about them all the time, so not just on Memorial Day, but they are with me as I speak today. So that's my thought real quick.
My name is Nicole Mendes. I play softball at the University of Oklahoma, and I'm also on the Olympic team for the Mexican national team. And the reason why I decided to be a part of the panel today was I always jump at the chance to talk about mental health and understand better practices, understand real life practices and what people are going through, and also any way that I can to talk about mental health and make other people see that it's something that even high level athletes, me, a normal person, me, a student, anything like that's something that happens and normal people have it, and it's not something to be ashamed of, but it's something to be talked about.
All right, I'm Michael Walker, educational consultant, PhD student. I currently work in Minneapolis Public Schools as a director for Black Student Achievement, licensed counselor, certified life coach, all those different tags as well. And the reason why I joined the conversation is obviously to share the insight that I had, but also to learn from everybody else that's on the panel and to hear their perspectives and things that I can maybe utilize in the work that I'm doing with the young people that I work with in schools. So it's always an opportunity for me to learn as well as share some of the knowledge that I have. So I appreciate being on the panel, JD.
Dorell, Wright, ex-NBA vet. I joined the panel, same, like everyone else, to speak on mental health and awareness and have a conversation and just letting people know it's okay to talk about it. And so appreciate you having me, JD.
Yep, no problem. Thank you. Welcome, everybody. Nicole, just want to really start off getting your thoughts on, obviously, we've all been quarantined for an extended amount of time. Is there anything that you've done that you felt have kept you upbeat? And then as you look back, are there any areas that you wish you would have spent more or less time to help you manage this time?
I've definitely taken to nature a lot more, a lot of hikes and walks. I think that's something that in like your normal day-to-day life you're so busy running around, getting stuff done that you don't really have as much time to go outside and really appreciate it. So I've been trying to really be intentional with going out and walks at least like once a week, and either with a teammate whenever we're still together or just kind of FaceTiming them as I'm going about my day. But it's a good way to get, I don't know, just out, exercise, get some fresh air, but also still make connections. But I know one thing. Sorry.
How's the knee been feeling after those hikes and walks?
It's been feeling pretty good. I got excited. I hiked up this place in Oklahoma. It's called Wichita Mountain. That thing took me like 2.5 hours to hike up. I took about 5 breaks. I was like, oh, I'm winded. But it was good. It wasn't sore. Everything else was sore the next day except for my knee. So I don't know if that's good or bad. But
no, it's been same for me is trying to get out, trying to get a breath of fresh air as much as I can. Luckily, being able to be in certain places where the weather is at least decent. Doc, have you been able to do much in that interesting weather that y'all have down in Minnesota, or what y'all? Oh, Mike, you too. My fault. What y'all doing?
Yeah, I've been out. I know JD is always on me about moving. As I get older, he's always saying, "Hey man, you got to make sure you're moving. You make sure you're moving." So I'm doing that a lot more than I probably have in the last 10 years, if I really reflect back. So I think that has been almost a silver lining, which is kind of weird. But I'm talking all the time about a silver lining in the midst of chaos, that kind of like we're living in. So that's been a silver lining, is the ability to kind of get out and move. Weather's starting to change here in Minnesota, so I think the snow is done. I hope.
No doubt. As Mike.
Yeah, so for me, I got a lot of kids, man. I got 4 kids that in our family, and so the slowdown, the silver lining is that they play a lot of basketball, soccer, different sports, gymnastics, and so having the ability to slow down, we've been able to like do some family stuff that we hadn't had the opportunity to do in the past. I'll just say, like, one day we was able to get through a full game of Monopoly. I mean, how often do you get to go get through a full game of Monopoly in this day and age, right? Because you got to get to practice here, you got to get to this game or whatnot. So that was been a huge benefit. Then the other thing is my wife was smart and she went and purchased us bikes. So that's been able to keep me active and get out in the world and, you know, kind of move around and stay physically fit, because, you know, I can sit around and lay around and eat up a lot of cookies and cakes. So yeah, it's benefit.
As parents, Doc, Mike, and Dorell, what has been the difference in this time period as opposed to the normal schedule? Are there things that you're learning about not only yourself as a parent, but as learning about your children, being and spending so much time with them that you may not have realized, that maybe habits that you're like, dang, this dude, he literally is exactly like me? Are there any moments that you can speak to, Dorell?
Yeah, man. So, you know, me being in Europe the last 3 seasons and leaving my family behind to go, you know, play is so crazy to finally see what my wife was talking about, how my kids are so crazy, have way too much energy and all that. So I'm seeing that live every day. So it's been fun, but Jesus, I cannot wait till they go back to school. But it's fun. It's fun.
Mike,
I'll say, go ahead, Mike.
Oh man, well, I guess my oldest daughter, who's a middle schooler, just the fact that they stay in a room she stays in her room all the time. And I was trying to figure out like what's going on with that, but a lot of it is that there's no connection to her community that she was connected to at school. So some of this physical distancing has also created a sense where they can't be social with their classmates. And so I know some of that is where she's in her room kind of playing on her cell phone, but probably texting and FaceTiming with her friends and not connected with family. They're teenagers, right? So they're trying to figure out how do they spread their wings in a time when you can't spread your wings. You're kind of quarantined to the home. And so that's been one thing. And then my son, my only son, I mean, he's a superhero. He's jumping all over everything and being a risk taker and whatnot. So yeah, that I'm with Dorell on that one. Like, come on, man, there's too much energy. Can I take a nap? Ain't no naps happening throughout the day. But yeah.
So I would say I get the benefit of being a little older, having older kids. So I think I'm getting a dose or a spoonful of what it will be like to be friends with my babies when they get older. I'm getting an idea of what that will look like. I catch myself engaging with them, not necessarily fully as a father, but almost like a buddy. And I even have said, if I was in your age group, your cohort, we'd have been good friends. I'd have been in your friend group, and I'd have been the one at your head talking big junk every day. But I think the other learning that I've had in these moments about my babies is we have a lot of things so we have Jaeger conversations. So we bring the family together. No one's going anywhere. We're just going to hang out and have dinner and talk and just be with one another. And one thing that I've continuously heard all 4 of my babies talk about is, Dad, how's this going to impact this, what we're dealing with? How's it going to impact us when we're older? Will we look back and say, man, that 2020 was crazy? Or will it just be something that we almost forget about? So I'm gaining insight into their thinking more deeply in this time frame. It goes back to that piece of saying there's silver linings, that we get to know our kids. I'm getting to know my sons better than I ever have, and I got a pretty good grasp on who they are as young men. I feel like I've even gotten closer with them through the midst of this chaos.
It's interesting for me to FaceTime my nieces and to watch, because they've grown up in only a digital world. They're so comfortable with going to school online and only having their phones because that's all they've done anyways. Nicole, with kind of being in that group where there was time where it wasn't just social media and online, but also now with school being cut short, what's your experience been in terms of taking classes online or having to communicate more with either professors or teammates, or what's that experience been like with you being a collegiate student athlete?
Yeah, I can definitely relate to your nieces. It was honestly not a huge transition for me. I take at least one online class every semester. So I was comfortable with it. Honestly, I prefer the face-to-face interaction, but I didn't think that it hurt my classes in any way. I will say the one thing is it's so easy whenever you're online all the time to just kind of just get sucked into that. And I remember thinking like, man, my eyes hurt from staring at the screen all day long. And I've never really felt that before. And it was kind of weird. And it almost got to the point where I was like craving to see someone. So I'd like put on my gloves, put on my mask, and go to the store just so I could see other people in real life. So I definitely kind of experienced that. And it was weird because I normally don't feel like that, but that was something new.
Hey, let me ask, and this is for everyone. So when Nicole, when you talk about that crave, I think we're all experiencing some of that right now. And it reminds me that that's part of the human condition. The human condition craves connection, and we've been isolated a lot. So have any of y'all felt that that craving for human connection? And if so, how do you kind of get at that craving or satisfy that craving, or do you just repress it and push it down? What have you guys thought or experienced?
Well, with me, and JD can back me on this, when you're in Europe, it's basically quarantine because you go practice, you go do whatever, and you just sit in the house. So we kind of been getting trained. We kind of trained for this already, so it's kind of crazy. But yeah, it's been hard, but you try to do as much fun stuff around the house. Luckily, I have a family, so we try to do as much fun things as we can and just try to switch things up. So it's definitely hard not to be able to see others and stuff like that. But I've been trained for quarantine the last 3 years.
To that point, all I think about is the 8 months I spent in Moscow, Russia, to where I didn't have an English conversation outside of hello, what time's practice, what's the play, when's the bus, for 8 months. So I was inside. If I wasn't on my way to practice or in the gym, I was inside all day, every day. It was snowing. So this really isn't that bad. And on top of that, just in my normal day-to-day, I like to be by myself. But with that being said, I do also understand that there's a privilege for me to have close friends that can put me in a more comfortable position to where we can spend time together. So we can take a flight somewhere and they're able to stay in a location that's like a vacation. So I don't mind it, but I do also understand that I'm in a position of privilege to be able to have a close circle that can put me in a very relaxing and put me in environment that I don't realize that we're in a pandemic. So trying to be aware that yes, that is a great opportunity to have, but being aware that there's a lot of people that don't just have access to people that have resources to allow you to basically be on vacation while the world is in a pandemic.
Yeah, craving for connections is something I definitely am a person-to-person individual. I like to be around people and be connected to folks. And obviously, Doc, you can attest to this. Me and my son rode our bikes to your house, came and rung the doorbell and just like stayed outside the driveway and just
helmet or no helmet, Mike?
No helmet. Don't get to talking about that.
Oh,
don't get me in trouble with my wife, and you got me all on the Zoom saying no helmet. I'm about to be in trouble. So it was no helmet, but it was important that I had to get my fix right. I call it my fix as well. So I went and visited Doc. I went and visited a couple of my other friends that live in the neighborhood and just kind of rung their doorbell, and we just kind of social distance away from each other just to be able to have that face-to-face interaction like Nicole talked about, going to the store to see actual people and not just do it through Zoom calls or FaceTime or whatnot. But yeah, it's difficult, especially for those of us who are quote unquote extroverts, right? Who like to be around people and like to be engaging with folks in person. You think about athletes who are connected to teams, and now all of a sudden you're not with those guys that you went to war with or fighting with or battling with every single day. And now your connections and conversations are totally different because you're not seeing each other, being able to touch each other and hug and, do all that physical stuff that we enjoy doing with each other. Yeah, that was tough. That's tough for me.
To that point, there's a piece that we talk about. So if we think about the word privilege, anytime that we are moving with privilege, it means that we can avoid what we want to avoid. Right? I can be avoidant of things. And there are a lot of people, so Dorell and JD talked about kind of like that training over the last few years that, hey, this has kind of been a norm. I think one differing aspect, because I agree with that, one differing aspect of it is it's different when you're told you can't do it, right? It's one thing to be isolated and that's just the rhythm of my life. But when you're isolated and people are telling you, now you got to stay in there and you can't go engage, the mind starts to do work on you that says, oh, I can't go be around others? Well, then what do I crave? I want to go be around others. So if you're on a diet and you normally don't crave chocolate, but you're on a diet and you see chocolate and all of a sudden you're like, man, I want some of that. Well, normally I didn't crave chocolate, but when I'm telling myself I can't have it, man, I want it more. So trying to work through that process of not having the opportunity to engage or being told not to, it's tough. It's been tough for me.
Hey, but Doc, it doesn't matter what we were doing. You're going to want some chocolate anyway or a burger.
Yeah, hold on. You see, you got to fit it in. Everybody, Dorell, everybody, Nicole, everybody, the dig is always my way. I take it, though. I take it. I got broad shoulders, baby.
To that point, Doc, and I think this is something we talk about, but we don't necessarily think about, is the health privilege. So there's a privilege for us to be able to say, okay, if I want to go on a walk, I'm going to go on a walk. I can wear a mask. I can wear it maybe not. I'm not as worried about what's going to happen to me. But there's a large group of people that are immune compromised, regardless of their scenarios, where, one, we're getting a chance to see how certain people live day to day, to where they have to be concerned with, okay, did you wash your hands? When there's no pandemic. So making sure that we take, what I'm trying to do is take this time to be aware of my health privilege, because a lot of times I move with it and I'm not even aware. I can get up, I can move, I can do what I want. I'm healthy, I take care of myself. But there's a lot of people that aren't in those circumstances, and on a day-to-day basis, they have to be concerned with every decision they make is, okay, what is this safe? Is this going to be okay? So balancing that health privilege, but also there's another group that has never had to worry about safety leaving their house. And when you come from where we come from, every day that I went to school in middle school, I was managing, okay, my school uniform is blue and white. When I leave school, I'm wearing red because that's my team colors. And then where am I going? So I'm processing. It's different than health privilege, more of safety and economic background privilege, but we've grown up to where every day I'm trying to figure out where am I safe, not based off of germs. So it's kind of a, I don't know if that's cognitive dissonance, or what that would be termed, but having experience with not being safe when I leave the house every day, but also being in the position now with the pandemic where health isn't really the reason why I don't feel safe.
See, and I think it's that fact. It's that case of sometimes we don't recognize a lot of these things until we're forced into that recognition space. So we don't realize that we have these privileges until all of a sudden that privilege is tapped on. The nerve of that privilege is hit. And you begin to say, man, I didn't even think about all those privileges that I have. Something that we hopefully are doing more of in during this time frame is that we're becoming more empathetic about our privilege, right? And those that may not have it. And we become more reflective on how we arrived at where we currently are, reflecting on the journey that brought us to where we are. And hopefully that will impact the journey forward and give us an opportunity to see one another more as equals, more as human beings, as opposed to putting us in specific boxes, right? So I think, again, and it's a pattern in this conversation today already, is that there are silver linings in those clouds. The question is, do we search and find those linings and take the lesson from those silver linings?
Kind of to pivot a little bit, we talked about this before in terms of the conversations of our youth and both the pressures that parents put on them sports-wise, but also the pressure that parents put on young kids to get straight A's, to take the AP courses. But as we know, once you get to college, those aren't necessarily the things that are going to provide you with success in life. I'd love to hear just the group's thoughts on how we can better support our youth without putting the pressure of you have to be ready for the NBA or NFL in 5th, 6th grade, and you also have to be a neuroscientist and get straight A's in every course in the 5th, 6th grade as well. How do we balance our expectations as adults with our youth? Because a lot of times there's so much pressure to be a star athlete, to be extrovert and have friends and be funny, to look good, to dress well. And they're like, man, I'm just trying to figure out where my next class is. How do you guys feel we can be more supportive of our youth as they grow in our society?
I would say, now that I'm, just started my AAU team and I'm dealing with parents a lot more now and the kids, I think the number one thing is the parents having that patience and also letting their kid be a kid. Because since Devin was on the AAU team at 7 years old, parents run up to me all the time. So what do my kid need to do? What is this? What about this and that? What about this trainer? I feel like they just need to be kids. Let them develop, you know what I mean? Continue to support them, but don't put too much pressure on them, because then the guys that were good at the youth level, once they get to high school, they don't want to play no more because of all the pressure that their parents put on them. And that weighs on them mentally and physically. So I feel like a lot of the parents just need to let their kids be kids. And it'll come.
Yeah, I mean, I got a lot to say on that, specifically with like the school system. So I'll just recite our mission statement for the work that we do, and Doc knows this mission statement pretty well, is that we exist to awaken the greatness within Black males and MPS, to have them determined to believe and achieve success as defined by their own values and dreams, right? And that last part is really important, about their own values and dreams. What are our students' values and what are their dreams? And our job as educators to help them basically put a plan together to reach that dream or that goal that they have. But the first part of that is we have to listen, right? Are we listening to our young people to see what it is they want, and not trying to have what our values are or our dreams are for the young person, right? So sometimes we have a lot of people living through their kids, which puts that added pressure on them, and the kids don't necessarily have a say in that. And so what we try to do is saying, we're going to listen to this young person and see what it is they want. And then my job is to help them get there. And my job is to ask them questions. Hey, how do you want me to push you? Right? Because if you want to get somewhere, I can give you the roadmap to get there, but this is what it's going to look like. So how are we being very intentional about the language that we're using with the students, about being upfront with them about what our work is with them? So like as a basketball coach, I have individual meetings with my players and ask them what their goals are for the season, right? So now I know what their goals are for the season. I say, so this is how I can push you to accomplish that goal. Are you willing to have me push you that way? Sometimes it's going to look like this, it's going to sound like this, right? But at the end of the day, I'm trying to be what's right for you and what you need. Now, if it's too much, we can have another conversation and I can reel it back, right? But it's about how do we stay in constant communication with our young people so they get the support that they need so that they can be successful. That's the approach that I follow and use. And obviously it comes out of this counseling mind frame of Carl Rogers, person-centered counseling, which is really about the people know kind of what they need, right? And so how do we ensure that their voices are the entire part of the process? And my job is to listen to them and deliver whatever service they need. And that's through what I know. So, yeah.
Hey, I'm reminded, and Nicole, this is probably a question that I'm pushing in your direction, but not anybody to think about. When we talk about values and dreams, everybody has them. We get them from our families, we get them from our upbringing, we get these value systems, and then we start to develop dreams that may be within that value system. But there also will be people in our lives that conflict with our value systems. Coaches and professors that conflict with how we've been brought up and how we see the world. So I want to talk or ask the question of how do we balance, how do y'all see balancing that value system when it comes up in contrast or conflict or rubs against another one, especially when someone's in a position of authority. A coach is in a position of authority, they have a value system, we have ours, and sometimes they clash. Thoughts about that?
Yeah. I think that's such a great question because in today's culture, it's kind of like everyone's values kind of mixed together. And honestly, I'm not a big fan of it just because I believe that if you have a value, there's a reason for it and there's a reason behind it. And if you compromise that value, then it's not really a value to you deep down. And you may try to hide it, but that doesn't mean it's not a value to you deep down. And for me, I know some of my values, like one of my biggest values is loving others. And if I'm in a position where someone in authority over me is in direct conflict with that, I can still love them. But at some point, I think there has to be a line drawn where you have to either firstly reach out and have a conversation with that person. And you have to be really honest. Here are my values, kind of like what Mike was saying. Here are my values. This is what I'm wanting. What are your values? What are you wanting to get out of this? Is there a way that we can work on this without overstepping my values and me overstepping yours? And then if that doesn't work, I think sometimes there are times where you need to remove yourself from a situation. Mm-hmm. And this may be an unpopular opinion, but in this world today, it's hard because whenever you stand up for something that you truly believe in and someone says that's not right, it's something that I believe in. So I want to stand up for it. And instead of being passive with my beliefs and my values and just saying, you're right, you're my boss, you're right, I need to stand firm and I need to have the integrity to myself and to my values to come true to what I believe.
Nicole, you used the word integrity. That's the word, that's the critical word in that conversation is integrity. And integrity is really me saying, all right, I'm conflicting with that value system that my boss or my coach has. The integrity says, all right, so what are you going to do with it? You're just going to clam up and just be mad inside but never voice it? Then we're starting to struggle with our own integrity and we walk away saying, man, you gave up your value system. My mom and dad would be upset with me if they knew I let that conversation go. I ain't say nothing. But we get nervous about that because when you stand up for your integrity and your value and it's in conflict with authority, you don't know what the outcome is going to be. Does that mean I didn't start the next week? Does it mean this professor gave me a bad grade on my paper? That I think, and that's a struggle. It's wrought with struggle.
I think also sometimes you may not even, if you don't say something, you may not even blame yourself or struggle with yourself, but you may start blaming the person in authority. But you also have to take responsibility. And I think that's something that's also lacking, is people don't take responsibility for what they're feeling. Okay, this person is the one who's kind of, that's where the situation is caused. Am I taking responsibility and going up and talking to them about it? Or like you said, am I just keeping it inside, going away, not feeling right, but not talking to them either? I think that causes a lot of problems too, because people will feel this kind of tension, but they'll never kind of address it. And so it just kind of builds up until finally it just explodes.
That's
One
right.
thing that, Doc, that we talk about, and a lot of others talk about, is, for me personally and a lot of people where I grew up around, there's certain principles that we stand on, but it's a little different set of rules when you get to corporate America. So certain things that we just wouldn't do, wouldn't say, behavior that we just wouldn't stand for where we come from, and you get to a certain level of success and you see it happening often, that struggle mentally of like, hold on, did they really just do that? And your reaction based off of where you grew up is much different than how you should react in that corporate space. So understanding and learning, okay, let me process the integrity piece, but also you got to be smart about how you handle certain situations. So that's a step that I think a lot of people deal with when transitioning to any spaces where you grow up, and what the foundation and the principles you stand on conflict with the rules of a different space, whether that's college, whether that's corporate America, whether that's whatever new job you may have, and just being able to process, okay, yes, I recognize that this isn't right based off of my standards, but now how do I go about dealing with them? I think is something that I try to continue to grow at, and just be aware of, because the reactions that you're used to may not suit the environment, and you may end up serving, hey, I'm not going to let nobody talk to me any kind of way, but is that really helpful for you in that space?
So I'm going to quickly go, and I know Mike has got thoughts on this, and I'm sure others do. But one thing, the question is, how do I do it? I heard you say how, JD, and I think there's a very pragmatic and practical way in which we may be able to answer the question of how do I engage against that piece. And it's being warm with our anger. I talk about it all the time. That usually anger presents itself one of two ways: very cold or very fiery. I'm a cold, angry person. If you make me mad, if I'm pissed at you, you won't ever hear me raise my voice. You just won't hear my voice very often moving forward, because I'm cold, like in that version. But warm anger, anytime I have a disagreement or the value system that I have is in conflict with someone else's, if we can be warm with our anger, we can be curious, because it allows us to hold our integrity. Because then I could say, you know, JD, I'm just struggling with why you say that or why you think we need to do it that way. Because I don't see the world that way, and I wouldn't do it that way. Help me better understand. So you can hear, I'm not happy with what you just told me to do. I'm in conflict with that. How do you put it out? That curiosity may be one way. Walk, I know you have some.
What would
Yeah,
the,
for sure.
no, you got it.
Go.
What would the
You guys go ahead, I can come back.
cold and fiery angry response look like, just so people can have a view of the different?
Cold would just look like you get in a disagreement or someone says to do something and you say, so I don't really have to mess with you though. So I just disengage from you. I'm gonna come to work every day, but you will get very short, precise answers. I'm not gonna engage with you. That's cold. Fiery is screaming and yelling. I might curse you out. That really fiery, pissed off type of anger would be those bookends, and warm would be in the middle with that curiosity.
And the only thing I would add to what Doc said, so Doc, you know, as you were talking, I was getting all excited because we ain't had this opportunity to present in a long time together. So it just it brought me back to a space we haven't done in a few years. But what I would say is that we got to get practice at it, right? And so too often as people of color, we don't have the space to challenge authority in a lot of opportunities. And so when we get to those positions or in those corporate spaces, I don't like that, but I don't even know how to say anything because I've never had the opportunity to practice that, right? Mm-hmm. And so what I try to do with our young people is that we allow them to practice early and often about challenging us as educators, as teachers in the program that we have, so they get used to understanding how to use their voice, how to advocate for themselves in a way that meets the needs, where it's not cold, it's not fiery, but it's warm. So now people can engage with you. We can have a disagreement, but we can also have a conversation about it so that you can hear my point, I can hear your perspective, and now we can create a new reality for how we're going to engage with each other around this topic. So I think practice is really important, and we got to find opportunities for our students, young people, to get that practices so that when they become adults, they understand and know how to do that as adults.
Mm-hmm. That's good.
Just to the group, and Dorell, I might give you a chance to kind of lead in on this. Being an athlete, and even if you're not an athlete, having something that was your outlet, whether it be music, an instrument, any hobby, an outlet for releasing stress, getting away, when that space is taken away from you. So some people take a job where they don't have enough time to work out as often or take their certain classes that were their outlets to stress. For you now retiring and transitioning into a space where, you know, basketball was something that you could put a lot of time, a lot of energy into. I'd love to hear the group's thoughts on, once that outlet is taken away or you no longer have it, how can we readjust and how can we find something else to channel our energy so that we're not caught in what I noticed from a lot of retired athletes and just people, period, is it's not necessarily the glitz and glamour of the sport that they struggle with. It's more of just the fact that I had somewhere to channel my energy and now I don't.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a great question, bro. And with me, it's just so early. It's only been like 2 months, and then, 2.5 months, and then all this stuff happened. So, but I did make a pledge to myself that I won't get into anything that I don't have that same passion and love for. Like, I want to get up like I did every morning to go to practice or games, for the next whatever career it is I'm going to take up. So that's what I'm trying to find. I'm trying to find that what's going to get me motivated and want me to get better and better every day, and in a challenge too. So that's how I'm trying to, weed out the little things little opportunities that I am getting right now. It's like, do I really want to see myself, or do I see myself doing this long term, and will I find happiness in this? So that's how I'm looking at things now. It's just finding those things that's going to make me happy, challenge me, and make me excited to get up every morning and go do it.
Nicole, being a collegiate student athlete, are there conversations that they have on campus in terms of, okay, once you graduate from here, there's going to be a whole nother world you're going to go into, and you're not going to have this outlet of being a student athlete? Are there any conversations that take place? And then for you specifically, has there been any preparation for when you're done being an Olympian and playing a sport, pivoting to something that you can give that energy to?
Yeah, I think as we get older in college, I start hearing more and more about it. Something that I wish I heard more about it was early on, honestly, as early as high school and freshman year in college, because I think that's the most important part to know then. Because what good does it do me if I'm hearing that in my senior year, and in 6 months I have to find something that I'm as passionate about as a sport that I played for most of my life. That gives me no time at all to pick up a hobby and know if I love it, or fully dedicate myself to a career. And I don't know if I truly love it because I haven't given myself the opportunity to test it out and to experience it. That's why I also see a lot of young kids who, like we've talked about this earlier, but one sport and that's it. And that's all they do. And they just train for that one sport, and they go to practice and they go to lessons, and they don't learn how to be kids. They don't know how to talk to other kids outside of their sport, or even sports in general. They don't know how to branch out into other communities. I truly believe that people don't just have just one passion. But I do think you do have to work for it, and you do have to kind of test out the waters a little bit. Tried picking up sewing this quarantine. Not my thing. It's not my passion. But a lot of like woodworking and painting, I found that I really enjoy it. And I never knew that. But if I hadn't had given myself the opportunity to test it out and try it, I wouldn't have known. And I think it's the same thing with my career. So this past year, I had a knee injury and I tore my ACL. And so that was as close to I've gotten as not being able to play anymore. And it was my senior year. So it was kind of like, oh my gosh, like, what am I going to do now? Do I redshirt? Do I end it? All this stuff. And so I was really struggling with that. And also, whenever I'm done, it kind of hit me a little bit more. What am I going to do that's going to truly make me feel the same way that I do whenever I'm out on the field and I'm having practice, like you said. And I had an idea, but I almost came up a little short. And I think that's something that I wish I had that thought and truly, truly discovered more earlier on, like in high school and before college, because I see so many of my friends and all they know is sports and all their friends are sports, and nothing's wrong with that. But whenever you go out and you graduate and you start to get a career, that's whenever you start to see, okay, well, sports isn't everything. So you kind of have to have a little bit more in your repertoire and kind of expand your horizons a little bit more.
And as you guys finish up on this piece, everyone attending, we're going to get to the Q&A in about 3 minutes. So if you have questions, just send them in, and then after this segment, we'll get to as many as we can.
Hey, quick question for Nicole. Nicole, there are a lot of athletes, especially in those spring sports, that lost the season, right? All of a sudden. And I just think about that senior year, high school or college, that all the preparation that all athletes have done from age 5, 6, 7, all the way building to now I'm a senior and this is a huge season and you look forward to it and the fans look forward to it. And then the rug was kind of pulled out from under all of that. I know you were returning from an injury as you came back into that final season, and then everything happened. Talk a little bit about, is there, will there be an additional year of eligibility that you'll receive? And what's the psyche, the mental psyche of dealing with that?
Yeah, I feel like we kind of came full circle with the first question that JD asked. He also wanted to know, is there anything that I would change? And like you said, it's this buildup, and I had been rehabbing for 5 months, and I worked my butt off, and I'm finally getting to play, and I get 2 home runs within my first 4 games, and I'm like, holy cow, like, this is going to be a season. This is going to be awesome. And then done completely, like within 3 days. And I come home, and I'm just kind of like sitting around for like 2 or 3 weeks. And I'm just like, what's the point? Kind of like just kind of listless, just staring at the wall, not really wanting to do anything because I put all my effort and I put all my chips on the table, and now it's like gone. It was taken away in an instant, it felt like. And that is something I wish I could have been better at noticing earlier. I think it took me a while to notice, and then kind of finding other things that could give me that excitement, give me that passion. But I will be returning. OU agreed to give their seniors another season of eligibility, and for softball players and spring sports and all those people who get to return as seniors, I know that in college, they definitely appreciate that, and they're excited. And I think being able to return, they're going to see so much more passion and motivation. Just because you're deprived of it, almost like what you're saying, like you can't have that now. Next year, like, okay, now I can have it, and you'll get to see what I can do. But for the high school seniors, yeah.
Not everybody is coming back to not only have another season, but also prepare for the Olympics too, which is awesome. We look forward to watching.
And Nicole, you talk about that. The the level of passion that we may see next season for all of players like you, because for so long as athletes, we're always told, play as if this is the last chance you'll get to play the game. But we don't really, I mean, we hear it, but I know I'll get to play next week or whatever.
Yeah.
This has been a pause that may reignite passion in players in a way that nothing else could really do. Everything was taken away. It was, oh my God, well, it may have been the last time I ever played. And then there's a reprieve and you think, oh, I will get one more shot. So the passion that may be produced through this, I think to your point, may be really, really high.
Yeah. 3 years. So my junior year, I got hit in the face and I fractured my cheekbone. And so I was out and I was like, I don't know, is this serious enough that I can't play? And then that year I kind of dedicated it to, that could have been my last thing. That could have been it. Mm-hmm. And then this past fall, I tore my ACL in practice and I was like, that could have been it. That could have been done. And then with season ending in the middle, I think I've really had enough opportunities that by now I should play like it really is my last, because I've had experiences that are scary and it could be really serious to be like, oh, like that could have been my last one. So I'm really excited to see how everyone else is playing. I think you're right. I think it'll be really fun.
That's cool.
Just across the board.
As we start off this Q&A, this first one is for you, Dorell. How have you been able to, or what has been your routine during this quarantine time to keep your mind well and clear as much as possible?
Well, right now, I wake up. I'm up around 6:30 every morning. You know who I am right now, so I like to get up early. I've become a fake chef. So I've been cooking a little bit, and I think my biggest joy right now is being able to be a player development coach to my son. So I've always just let him do him and not be on him too hard. So now I'm finally getting the opportunity to train him and get him better, and just take advantage of this time right now. So that's probably like my biggest joy right now is training Devin and seeing the process and him getting better and better each time we get out there. So that's what I'm having fun doing right now. And that's pretty much my routine is going out there in the front yard with him and watching Dash do flips all around the house. Like he's the Black Panther, he says. So those are my routines, just telling Dash to stop flipping and doing crazy stuff and training Devin.
How old are the kids, Dorell?
I have a 12-year-old and I have a 5-year-old.
Okay. You got your hands full, boy.
Man.
Doc, during these times of COVID, how has it, or how do you think it's impacting our youth in terms of needing and trying to receive psychological or mental health support?
So if you went into this chaos of quarantine and isolation in need of therapeutic psychological support, you may have the tendency to think, oh my goodness, well, everything else is on pause. I think one thing that we should all know or be plugged into is that therapeutic support is still available. A concept called telehealth, where you can do virtual therapeutic sessions like we're doing here with your therapist or psychologist. You can also do things over the phone. So there are ways in which we can find support, especially for those younger people. And the young people, the children in our life, you think about a 16, 17-year-old child, that they are doing or going through the process of adolescent development anyway, which is a trying time. If we reflect back to when we were that age, we're trying to find the boundaries in our lives and discover who we really are, which I think is a lifelong venture. But at that point, you're really just beginning that journey. So you layer this process on top. If there were things that were already in place that may have been struggles, it can magnify that. So as parents, engaging with networks of resource to make sure that we can find those supports for our young people, and making sure that they know, hey, we're going to get through this together. I think, JD, to your point, one thing that we should really be emphasizing to the young people in our lives is, hey, you're not in this journey by yourself, baby boy or daughter. We're in this together. I'm going to walk this with you. So finding that support is not something that I as a parent have to do by myself to help you, that we'll do it together. I think is one way that we can really kind of think about that.
And then Mike, kind of on that point, as everyone kind of transitions back to work and teachers, adults, professors get ready in terms of preparing for the fall when students come back, what are some ways that you feel, especially in the school system, in terms of the workspace, that we can be supportive of people as they return back to work and as students return back to school after this long hiatus or quarantine period?
Yeah, and even that question that you just posed is still, there's a lot of uncertainty around when we're going back, how we're going back. Like, there's so many different layers to that. And one thing I want to start off with is kind of backing up what Doc said, is that during like these crises and pandemics, there's a lot of anxiety that is being released, and folks are having this anxiety. And our what we have to know is that trying to learn new lessons or new learning targets that schools folks are delivering may not always stick and stay when you have a brain that is dealing with maybe anxiety or depression or whatever, especially in this time where there's trauma going on. And so we got to be mindful that we slow down some of the learning that we do. Doc and our work, we talked about having differentiated expectations, and this is a time where we got to have some differentiated expectations of how we're going to process the learning for our young people. And so what I mean by that is not saying that we should not do any learning, but how do we check on them first? So one thing that I charge my staff with that work in our department is that we're going to do wellness checks for our young people, because we don't know what everybody's situation is at home, right? We talk about the essential workers, and we fail to realize that a lot of our families of color are those essential workers. They're working in the face-to-face service industry, where they're at the grocery stores. They're the ones who are in some of these plants that are packaging the food and delivery and those sorts of things, right? And so now that means there's an adult outside of the house. And now we have this distance learning that's happening. And so now you may have some older teenagers who are now responsible for their younger siblings to ensure that they get their learning going on. And so some of that may not be able for them to be able to take care of their own learning, because they're covering and helping out some of their other students. Also, you got to think about the fact that these families are out in the space, and what's the possibility of them contracting this COVID-19, right? So now you got that worry on top of it. So again, a lot of this is saying, how do we lead with grace? Grace is like really important during this time, as we're talking about educating our students, educating our families. And some of that means we got to be in constant communication with our students and families, which is really difficult, especially when you're talking about populations that have been traditionally marginalized within our schools, right? So now the fact that we're in distance learning is an opportunity to even further marginalize those families, because now we're looking at technology, Wi-Fi, computer, right? All these different things that we have to overcome. And grace is what's going to help us get through this, meaning take some slow steps, be intentional about reaching out to those families. If I can't reach out to the families because I don't have the best relationship with them, how do I leverage relationships with other adults that are in our system who may have a good relationship, or even leverage relationships with other students who have relationships with these students to connect with them? So a lot of this is saying, how do we think so far outside the box in order to do what's right for our students? So that kind of gets me to the space of what we should be doing as we go back into school. We should be taking it slow, because we have to reacclimate everybody back into the school, right? Because now they've been away and they've been able to do their learning on their own time, which means they've had a little bit of control on when they access the learning with this speed. I don't got to get up every day at 8 o'clock in the morning. I can go log on at 12 o'clock and do the work or whatever. So now we got to get people back on these so-called routines that we have had in order to get them prepared. So it's going to be a learning curve for everybody to get back into that space. And then, again, you're going to have people who are not so comfortable coming right back into school. So now how do we welcome them back into the space so that we don't create more anxiety on them worrying about this pandemic? So again, like I said, I don't have all the answers, but a lot of the process is going to be, how do we lead with grace through this process? and how do we take into account people's ability to just jump in and hold on while we're still trying to give the resources and needs for everybody to learn and be educated through this process. I know there's a whole lot, but hopefully
I appreciate
I was able to grab something out of it.
This next one for me and you, Nicole. For me, how do I keep work-life balance, and then how do you kind of keep the student-athlete life balance? I'll start. For me, I don't think I do a good job. I think part of it is the gift of my work is something that I love to do. So being a coach and being around basketball is something that I enjoy. So I can get lost in spending days at a time just working because it doesn't feel like work. And then outside of that, running, everyone has a story, and being able to put together these different panels is also something that I love. So it's like a catch-22, I guess, is because I'm spending a lot of time in stuff that I enjoy, but also trying to check in and having people around me that will check me in terms of, have you done something for you? I think that's been my biggest help, is having people to remind me to do it, because just on my own, I'll just go through stages of either doing my job, which is coaching for the Detroit Pistons, or when I'm not doing that, I'm spending the rest of the time working with this organization. So there's balance to me because I love both of them. But when I really take a step back, it's like I can go weeks at a time where I haven't truly done anything for me. So one, being aware of it, being aware that I'm not good at it, but two, having people that will check me on that.
I know for me, the biggest thing is making a list of priorities, like at the beginning of the week or beginning of the month, and just kind of going down from there. So top priorities, and making sure that it's not too overcrowded with just softball or athletics or work related stuff, or it's just not all like pleasure and fun and hanging out with friends 24/7. I try to find priorities that are pretty evenly balanced, and normally whenever I start to feel stressed, I'll go back and I'll look and I'll be like, okay, yeah, one is taking over a little bit too much from the other. But what you said about having people that can kind of remind you or keep you on track, I think it's good to have, like, I have teammates or people on staff for the softball team that can help me practice softball and that I can hit with. And then also, as I mentioned before, I think it's really important to have friends outside of sports who can kind of give you a different perspective. So I like hanging out with those friends a lot because I'm around athletics and sports all the time, and I hardly ever get to see the other side or see what's going on. And it's just a good place to go whenever you want to get your mind off of sports. Sometimes you need to get your mind off of sports, and which is work for me. So that's been really nice. And during the quarantine, I've been with my parents. And so they've kind of taken on that role of, hey, like, let's hang out as a family. Or sometimes like, hey, like, you want to come throw with me today? And my dad will come throw with me. So that's kind of the work part. But definitely priorities for people.
To that point, I think the biggest decision, or best decision I made in college was rooming with guys that had nothing to do with our team. So my roommate, Daniel's son, was a biochemist. He just got his PhD in Switzerland for biochemistry. Dude don't have no care about, does he watch it? Yeah. But he got graphs and all types of shit on the wall when we was in. I was like, what? But it helped me get away from the basketball and living with teammates. So to that point, I found that was very beneficial. The next one is for me and Doc, but anyone else can chime in, how to be supportive of someone when they're grieving. For me, what I usually try to do and what helps me is to ask. So to say, hey, I want to be supportive of you. What is the best way for me to be supportive of you during that process? I think sometimes we give on to people the type of support that we would like, but we don't necessarily ever ask the person, how can I be supportive of you? And the other space is just ensuring to people that there's no time frame on grieving. How I grieve is different from Nicole, is different from D. Wright, Corey, and Mike, and there's no right or wrong. So not feeling as though someone should say, hey, it's been 6 months, you got to get over that. Hey, it's been 5 years, you got to get over that. My best friend who passed away when I was in 10th grade, I still have moments where I'm not truly over it, but someone could say, hey, that was over 10 years ago. Yeah, but there's moments where I feel a way about it. So ensuring to people, for me, there's no time frame. Your grieving process is yours, but also asking, hey, how can I be supportive of you during these times?
Yeah, my dad died 35 years ago. I'm still grieving that loss. I will grieve the loss of my father till I leave this earth. There should be, to your point, no expiration or no expectation on grief and loss. So simply the thing that the best advice that I would give is connected to the process of sitting Shiva in Judaism. That Shiva it occurs after the death of someone, and really it is just being with the person that is dealing with that loss and that grief. Sometimes that's not my words, because what we know, and when you lose someone, there are no words that will really replace anything. All you're doing really is seeking comfort and walking the journey, and being with those folks that are dealing with grief and loss is maybe the most important thing that we can do. Let me just be with you. So that's the piece that comes to mind quickly for me.
And Mike, this is kind of for you, but anyone in the group, and Doc, I want to get your thoughts on this one as well. Kind of a shift a little bit, but how do we improve or work on behavioral habits that seem to be self-sabotaging in relationships? So one, how to be aware of them, and then how do you work on them once you're aware of behavior patterns that may self-sabotage either friendships or relationships?
Well,
the first part is recognition, right? If I'm not recognizing that those are even happening, then obviously I'm unaware to it. So how do we find people in our circles that can help us when they see those behaviors to recognize that for us? The key to that is, though, first and foremost, we have to be willing to allow people to give us that information and feedback. Because if we don't allow that information and feedback to come to us, then we're not going to get better at it, right? So that's one thing, and that's for like in the circle that you have. But if you are aware of some of those things, then obviously then there's opportunity to speak with other folks, whether it be a counselor, therapist, whoever, to kind of figure out what is the root of that action that is taking place, and why is it manifesting itself in a way that is taken away from your future or current relationships that you're trying to have, whether they're friendships or romantic relationships. So that's kind of a couple quick little thoughts on that.
So in terms of sabotage is something we do deliberately. Oftentimes those self-sabotage in relationships is unconscious. That I picked a fight, or it kind of blew up into a bigger conversation. That sabotage is rooted in something. That goes to Mike's point, that goes back. So doing the reflective process or engagement in relationships, where did I begin to struggle in such a way that I find a way to kind of make the relationships go away, or struggle with going back to those earlier moments that produce that level of sabotage, and understanding better who we are. And how that's connected to who we are in this current relationship. So I think we all do some of that self-sabotaging. We can do less of it once we understand and become aware of kind of the reason that we do it, because sabotage is done for a reason. Because I'm nervous about getting too close to you. And I haven't attached to someone like this for many years. And when I did attach to somebody like this earlier in my life, I was shown that doesn't work. And they kind of pulled away from me. So I'm looking for the moment that you'll leave me. So instead of waiting for you, I'll sabotage it. And I'll make it go chaotic, so we can there's a reason for us to go our separate ways. Mm-hmm. Those are just quick thoughts on that.
And then as we close, this is kind of something for the group to have each person touch on as we close. Is two things. One, kind of what have we taken from this conversation? And then two, what would we like to see from these type of conversations in the future amongst our friend group, our kids, whatever the case may be. To start, for me, what I've taken away from this group is just a reminder that everyone has a story, and to always try to find that story in each individual. Like even people that you've known for an extended amount of time, there's experiences and ways that they've handled experiences that we all can learn from. So continuing to, obviously I have an organization that's called that, but continuing to on a day-to-day basis, try to find what's the story, what's the journey, what's the experience that every individual has had, how they got through it, and how can I learn from that? Because I think there's so many different circumstances that we've either experienced or that other people have experienced that we can really learn from without having to actually go through it. And then in terms of what I'd like to see, it's just for myself to continue to create safe spaces in my work environment. So as a coach, for different coaches, for different players, to have these conversations and to normalize these conversations, because being in a position to where I work with people that have influence, if I'm able to normalize the conversation amongst those small groups of people, then they carry that water to their communities and their social networks and their environments, which slowly but surely expands that normalcy of addressing that you may be struggling, reaching out for psychological support, but also being supportive and creating different spaces in our day-to-day lives for people to understand that it's cool to not have the answers for everything, and just being able to watch our next generation grow up watching us have these conversations, and how much better our communities will be when they see men and women of color, especially having these conversations in positions that they look at as, oh, he coaches, he's a therapist, or she's a Olympian. I thought everything was perfect. I'm watching her on TV, but to see like, oh, so you can be at a high level and still have struggles, but also there's ways that you can receive support. And look at her, she went out and intentionally tried to deal with the things that she's dealing with. I feel more inclined to do the same at a much, much younger age.
Well, since I'm unmuted, I'll go quickly too. What I take away from this conversation is the importance of community and the importance of having a diversity of thought within your community, right? If we all think differently within our communities, what we do is we get a variety of opinions and thoughts that we get to learn from. So if we have that, what we call requisite, almost required level of diversity and variety, we get the opportunity to learn from it. So I think that is something that I take away from this conversation. And really what I hope for is that these conversations continue on, not just these, but the conversations day to day that we have within our social networks, that we become more comfortable with talking about mental wellness, and more comfortable continuing to hold that conversation as time moves forward.
I'll go next. Something that I really took away from this, I took a couple things, but the two biggest things is, as someone who's younger, really, it's hard sometimes to go to people that are older than you because you think, oh, like, I want to get it done myself, or I'm going to go to my friend group. But just talking with my parents while being home, talking with you guys, and being able to learn stuff that you've been through and that you've learned and you've experienced, if I could save myself the trouble of having to go through that, and if I can learn from people who are older and people who are wiser than me, I think that is something that is really, really important. I've been learning that a lot. And another thing that I've really enjoyed and I want to take back into my personal life is just taking the time to just talk with people and just ask them just questions that I've been curious about, or questions that I've been asking myself, and ask them and see how they view it. Almost not a medium anger, but just a medium of curiosity, and just seeing a different perspective and seeing what they think and seeing why people react certain ways and why they're doing what they're doing in a situation. That's something that I want to take away and apply to my life going forward. And then something that I would like to see in the future is, I guess, those two things, but also really seeing the development of people using their voices for what they believe in and not backing down, even if it is an unpopular opinion. we've expressed stuff and we've been honest and open. And I feel like it was so refreshing. And we came into this conversation with the mindset of maybe we won't hear something that I'm used to hearing, or maybe we'll hear something that I haven't even heard before, but we came in open and willing to listen and conversate and give it thought and debate. And going forward, I would love to see more people go into conversations, go into relationships, go into partnerships with that same kind of mindset.
What I took from it is how important having a conversation is, and speaking to people that's smarter than you and have a lot more knowledge than you, because that's when you learn the most stuff about life and what you're going through and what other people are going through. And what I would like to see is just continue the conversation, and hopefully with us talking, we touch 2 or 3 people, even if it's one person, so I just think it's very important, because this life is a roller coaster. Everything is never just smooth sailing. It's always going to be ups and downs and stuff like that. So to continue to let people know from all aspects of life, from the superstars all the way to the people that's doing, working a 9 to 5 every day, that we go through stuff, probably the same thing. So it's okay. Just have those conversations and don't be afraid to reach out to people and talk.
And that bank account doesn't protect you from life issues. Like how many zeros you have, that's not protecting you from having to deal with the same things and struggles.
100%.
A couple takeaways for me. One is, and I guess it's what I take away from the conversation, but also what I want to take with me once I leave or see continue, is that silver lining, right? How do we look for the silver lining in all things that are occurring? Because there are opportunities where there can be some good coming out of some things that may not be so good on the outset. So making sure that slowing down and looking for that silver lining in the space is really important to me. And then, I know this is called the Right Conversation, this podcast and whatnot, but really, how do we replicate these conversations, and not necessarily in Zoom meetings, but in the spaces that we are all involved in, right? So when I leave this Zoom meeting and I talk with my brothers and sisters, how do I also have this conversation with them? When I leave this Zoom meeting, I get on my call with my team that I work with in my school district. How do I make sure that I'm allowing this to be part of that conversation? Because what we have to realize is that we are all in need of that mental wellness and opportunity to just release. And so what I'm taking away from this conversation is I was able to release in this conversation. I was able to get knowledge and get information to make me feel better, to walk away and say, oh, I needed that. So I got my, how we go to get physical fitness, right? I got my mental fitness today, and this was important for me. So now I can move and push on and continue doing the work that I need to do for the young people that I'm serving. So I appreciate it, JD.
Yeah, and to that point, Mike, we all receive our support differently. Some people enjoy the quote unquote clinical hour of therapy, sometimes understanding that this is a version of therapy. So talking to your best friend, talking to your older cousin, talking to your group of friends about what Nicole was saying, what we're struggling with, asking curious questions is really what happens and you guys can attest to, is what goes on in the clinical session. There's back and forth. There's inquiry from the therapist. You're thinking about, dang, I never thought about that. Trying to put behavior to certain experiences and draw some type of conclusion from them. So just understanding that everyone's process is different, and giving yourself grace just by opening up and having a conversation. I think sometimes we don't understand that is a huge step in progress. It's just initiating a blanket conversation about anything that you're struggling with anybody. Understanding that is a step to being more mentally well. If there's any final thoughts, other than that, we appreciate everyone tuning in. We appreciate you guys joining us. We'll be back again next Sunday. Our newest episode with Dorell is out on all streaming platforms, wherever you find your podcast, The Right Conversation, and we'll be dropping another episode next Thursday. Thank you guys. We appreciate you. We'll see you all next week.